Well, as Paul continues talking about these three illustrations, the one about enduring hardship as a good soldier of Jesus Christ, secondly, athletes who receive the crown are those who play within the rules, and thirdly, he says in verse 6, the hardworking farmer should be the first to receive a share of the crops. Now, what is he saying here? Well, we talked about yesterday how that we have to learn to endure hardship as good soldiers of Jesus Christ. That means we realize that we don't ever have to quit, that no matter what challenge God puts in front of us, there's always going to be his strength of grace that's going to enable us to continue on. We're going to be able to exceed our natural capacities. And secondly, that grace is only available as long as we live within the boundaries that he's outlined within his word. Because if we live outside those boundaries, we step out of the place where grace is poured out upon us in abundance. And we begin to reap the consequences of listening and following after the devil's temptations. But thirdly, he says, but those who do those things are the ones who reap the reward. And rewards are one of those concepts that oftentimes Christians say, well, what exactly are these rewards? And we wonder about the things that we receive in this life and also the things that might come in the next life. Now, if you want to talk about heavenly rewards, I have to kind of admit, I really don't know for sure. I think part of the things is that the things that are in heaven are beyond the capacity of a human mind to really conceive of. All I know is the Bible says that it's going to be worth it. It's going to be above and beyond. Or Paul put it this way, eye has not seen, ear has not heard, nor has it ever entered into the imagination of man what awaits mankind, waits us on the other side. So I just know it's going to be really, really good. And all you got to do is look around at the world that we live in with all of its beauty and all its wonder. All you got to do is eat fresh fruits in the summertime and taste how delightful they are. And you recognize that a good God created a good world that was corrupted by sin, but he has a heaven that's even better. And it's going to exceed anything I can even think about within my human or mental capacity. So saying that, he's saying, the one who works the hardest is the one who receives the first share of the crop. And there's a principle in that that's really quite important for us to grasp, especially in this day and age where socialism is becoming Marxism, is becoming a popular concept, especially among young people. Because there's a reason why socialism has never worked in the world, anywhere it's been tried. And there are some, Marxists who say, well, that's because they didn't do it right. Typical arrogance of people who don't know what they're talking about. The reality is that they did it the best of their ability, but there was always something that really sabotaged their best efforts to create a perfectly equal world, and that's called our sin nature. The concept of socialism, that everybody should have an equal share of everything, is not a bad concept. And in some ways, it's something that we should work towards in every society, regardless of its political or governmental structure. But the reality is that there are sinful people in the world, and those sinful people have a tendency not only to take advantage and even be greedy with what they've got and withhold what some other people have, but also to basically steal from other people, or basically if they can't see a way forward, they'll just simply sit back and let someone else do the hard work. Having spent a lot of time in communist or former communist countries, especially after the collapse of the Soviet Union, one thing I got to see was the direct consequences of a communist system, of Marxism at work. And what you found was that socialism doesn't work because people who are locked into that system don't work. They don't work hard. They know they're going to get the same paycheck no matter how hard they work. They know that promotions are not based upon competence or hard work or merit. It's based upon simply who's favored by the people who have the power to give favor out. And so they realize it's inherently inequitable, even though it claims to be equitable. And so as a consequence, people don't really work that hard. They just do enough to get by. In fact, I was reading an article about the whole futuristic plan of basically setting everybody up in the world with a universal basic income, because AI will take up over all the production, the mechanisms of the world, and we won't have anything to do. And so what the government will do is give us each a paycheck each month, and that will be our regular allotment. And of course, the question is, how do you keep people from stealing other people's allotments? And that gets into the whole technological of biometric readings and all this sort of stuff I'm really not supposed to be focusing on in this setting. But the point is this: at the end of the day, because of that sin nature, people will inherently do as much as they can to move forward, but if they feel that their way is blocked, they'll stop putting out effort. And so one of the things that really is wrong with the whole socialist Marxist concept is it contradicts creation, which means it runs contrary to our basic programming as people. You see, when God created man, he gave a command to him. He said, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Three things: to be fruitful means to be abundant, to multiply means to gain increase, and to fill means to prosper. And so we have this thing inside of us that needs to be prosperous. We need to be productive. We need to feel that whatever we're doing has a purpose and a meaning behind it, and the result is good and favorable, that it's advantageous to do something. And so if you tell somebody, if you work hard, I'll pay you $10 an hour. If you work really hard, I'll pay you $12 an hour. What do you think is going to happen? That incentive that I'm going to gain more from working harder always has the effect of motivating people, except for those who have totally given up on doing anything productive with their life anywhere. But the simple concept, even Jesus said it in Luke 10, Paul repeated it in 1 Timothy 5. He said, the laborer is worthy of his hire. So the problem with socialism overall is the idea that whether you labor or you don't, you're all equally remunerated. It's all equal, and that's supposed to make people happy. But the whole point is there's something inside of us that God created, and that is to increase and to expand. In fact, he said we had dominion over the world, which meant basically we had to extend our control over the planet. And the idea right now that's operative in many world governments is to take away that control and that ability to exercise dominion and to reduce it to the hands of a few elites who control everything and tell us what we can and cannot do. And invariably, that always leads to the same thing. First of all, it leads to a collapse, a drop in productivity. It leads to poverty. It leads to starvation. In the Soviet Union, it led to millions dying of hunger. And same thing in China. Millions died when the government began to take control of the production of food and took the ability, the incentive of making a profit away from people. This has always been the record, and it certainly will become the record again in this country if we keep on giving play to this kind of non-biblical nonsense. But the whole point is that we need to feel like we're having an increase. And what God is saying to the Christian is that we need to be hard workers. Hardworking farmer. The farmer is planting the seed. He does all the things necessary to make the seed grow. He cultivates the soil. He prepares it with fertilization. He puts the seed in the ground. He waters the seed. He protects it from things that will come in and destroy or hinder or harm the crop. And he waits for the right time to harvest it. And then he brings it in. He stores it. He prepares it for market. He does all these different things necessary in order for him to turn a profit. And that's the whole point, is that we can apply those illustrations really to how God wants us to lead our own lives, that we are called to work hard in the fields of the Lord. He said the fields, in fact, have already been planted. They've already been nurtured. He said they're white. They're ready to be harvested. But he says, pray the Lord will send laborers into the harvest. So what we have to understand is that God is the one who is really the farmer, and he's the one who has done all the cultivating and all the planting and all the fertilizing and all the nurturing and the watering. He wants us to be people who are willing to go out and harvest what he has already prepared. And that is hard work. I mean, one of the things I find really interesting is that every week I prepare a message for Sunday morning. I prepare messages for doing this sorts of thing. And, you get the drift of what I'm saying. The whole point is it involves hard work. It's not something that's easy. You don't just simply shoot from the hip and say whatever happens to come into your mind at the moment. And the thing is that my dad used to tell me that he didn't respect ministers because he said they only work one day out of the week. And then when I became a pastor, he was shocked to realize that it was more like I worked 6 to 7 days a week and hardly ever got a day off because you're always on duty. You're kind of like a doctor who's ready to be called in at any moment. And many times you just have to put in your hours. That's a simple reality of being a servant of the Lord, that you don't set your time, you don't set your wages, you don't set the terms of employment, you don't even get to choose the fields in which you work. In other words, quite honestly, I never would have chosen to live in Spokane, Washington, because I like a place that has a beach and a sun and a short drive to the nearest ski hill, which was kind of perfect where I lived in California. But the point is, this is where God wanted me to be a farmer. This is where God wanted me to invest myself, and that's why I'm here. And now after 40 years, I think about the many rewards that God has bestowed upon me and my wife and our family because we were faithful to stay in the field all these years. Anyway, out of time, got more to say tomorrow. We'll continue. Blessings.